Welcome in, everyone, to the It's Official podcast, the post-race review of Kentucky Derby 150. He's Jeff Siegel. I'm Jeremy Plonk, and we're both still looking for fierceness out there. Fierceness, where are you? Fierceness.
Where are you?
Oh, man. The favorite with one of the big laid eggs in Kentucky Derby history, finishing 15th. Second worst finish I can find in the history of the race, only behind Frisian Fire's 18th place finish in a year where it just rained and everybody made him the favorite for no reason. There was good reason to make not Frisian Fire, but Fierceness the favorite in Kentucky Derby 150. But Jeff, he just did not show up for work. We're going to talk about who did show up. We're going to celebrate Mystic Dan. We're going to take a look at Torpedo Anna, some of the horses from the undercard on Derby 150 and the weekend for the Oaks and Derby. We've got a lot to review, but give me your quick thoughts of the overview of the Kentucky Derby.
Great day of racing. Everybody came back healthy and sound that I know of. So that won't be a storyline like it was last year. But the race itself was as thrilling a Derby as you could possibly imagine. I wasn't around in 1947, I think it was.
Yes, it was.
Okay, but it was that close. But this was a great Derby, not only because of the finish, but because it was in doubt to the very last jump. You didn't know who was going to win. We had some terrific performances by those that ran well. Others did not, but that's going to happen in a big race. And it still leaves room for further discussion. We still have the Preakness and the Belmont and all the good races in the midsummer and fall for 3-year-olds to decide it. So this is just a stepping stone. But and I was also glad to see Mystic Dan win, one for the little guys. You know, I always like to see that. You can't buy the Derby. You got to go out and get a little lucky and do the right thing. And Mystic Dan had a very appropriate campaign leading up to the race. I actually thought, Jeremy, maybe you can tell me what you thought, but I was prepared to throw him on my ticket, on the main ticket, on Friday because of the off track. Then it didn't rain on Saturday, and they were running on a pretty much fast growing. So I reverted back to, well, I think maybe his race in the Arkansas Derby probably is more accurate than the runaway win he had in the mud. So I didn't use him, and I was sorry that I didn't. But it was still a great day of racing, great races on the undercard, lots to look forward to.
I used him underneath. I thought he could land on the ticket, but I didn't have him in the top slot. I only had 2 horses in the top slot, and at the top of the stretch, I felt okay about it. Fierceness and Resilience. And Resilience was making a heck of a move. Let's go back to Travis Stone's call of Kentucky Derby 150 as we start our postmortem of Mystic Dan's Derby.
It is wide open. Catching Freedom's going to come through toward the inside. They're off the turn. Mystic Dan cut the corner and grabbed the lead right at the top of the stretch. Sierra Leone and Forever Young are shoulder to shoulder with a furlong to go, but they've got 2 lengths to make up on Mystic Dan, who's begging for the wire. Forever Young and Sierra Leone keep on coming. Sierra Leone, Forever Young, and Mystic Dan. A wild finish. Here's the wire. Photo finish. 3 noses on the wire. Mystic Dan, Sierra Leone, and Forever Young in an international thriller.
Great call there from Travis Stone that will be remembered for many years. It was almost an international incident. We'll talk about that as well in the stretch run. But what a ride by Brian Hernandez squeezing through on the inside. We'll take a closer look at that in just a moment, Jeff. Everything worked out, and it has to work out that way in the Kentucky Derby, right? We've seen that rail rally, whether it was Rich Strike, whether it was Bind That Bird, whether it was Street Sense. That has worked. That's been a good recipe. And Brian Hernandez has spent his career around Churchill Downs. He's seen it before from the jocks room, and he got to live it on Saturday.
We speculated that the inside post would be a disadvantage because of the traffic, and Mystic Dan was 8th early. But he moved up midway and never left the rail. And turns out that 3-hole post that he had really paid dividends. You can see him come through in the inside and scrape paint. Whereas Sierra Leone, we figured he'd have to go take the circular route, which he did.
Right.
But Mystic Dan got through, but he had the acceleration to do it. I'll give him credit for that. It opened up, but you still have to have the horse to do it. Whereas Sierra Leone and Forever Young had to go outside, and of course, at the end of the race, the difference was the trip. But I'm going to give Mystic Dan credit because he was right in where he needed to be by Hernandez, and then the ability to win the race really with that acceleration he had in the upper stretch, and they'll be able to open up and then hang on for dear life.
That was definitely the case. I mean, look, the 1.25 miles was getting to him for sure. That was the thing in the Southwest. He had that acceleration and went on at 1.125 miles. At 1.25 miles, he did come back to him a little bit, but not enough. And as you know, the tightness between the horses on the outside played out, and they were slugging with each other down the stretch. There's a real thought process with Tyler Gaffalione actually reaching out and putting his hand on Forever Young that the stewards should have at least lit the inquiry light here and taken a longer look at this. I don't believe that you have to rely on the jockey to post an objection in this case. You see here Gaffalione reaching out with the left hand, and he's going to put his hand on Forever Young in the next frame that we're going to see. And to me, when you see that frame and you see what happened in the stretch with the head-on replays that were available to the stewards, that could have warranted disqualification quite easily in a race where they have a precedence now since 2019 that they're not afraid to take a horse down in the big one.
And this horse, they wouldn't even have to have taken down the winner because he didn't do anything. Let me put it, first of all, the fact that there was no inquiry and then no disqualification is absolutely inexcusable. That's number one. Number two is, if this were the NFL and those were referees, they would get an email the following day saying, your next assignment will be an exhibition game in Finland.
The United Football League in the spring.
Somewhere like that, because that is a bad miss. Okay, it didn't cost the winner. The winner would have remained the same.
Right.
But finishing second and third as opposed to third and second, there's a lot of purse money involved. There's a lot of exotic money wagered.
Absolutely, that's the key. Yeah.
And it's just a blunder beyond imagination, as far as I'm concerned. And I just don't know how they could be that bad. But we've seen it before, and we'll see it again, I'm sure.
Right. And if you leave it up to the jockey to claim foul in this particular case, and the connections have done the honorable thing, we've seen quotes from the connections of Forever Young saying, look, our horse gave a valiant effort. We came up just short. We didn't feel the need to claim foul. But they're okay with it as far as the purse money goes. That doesn't mean anything to the bettors. The bettors aren't okay with it, who missed by 6 inches, 8 inches from second in exactas, tries, supers. You've got tens of millions of dollars involved in the exotic wagers in that race. Who's protecting them? I mean, the jockey's protecting the owner's protecting their own financial interests, but who's protecting the betting public? That's what the stewards are there for. So it's inexcusable to me that they don't make a move in this particular case. If you're going to disqualify Maximum Security for fouling the 17th place horse on the far turn, 2.5 furlongs from the wire, how can they say that this did not impact the result of the race? That was an actual quote from the steward's statement that the incident they reviewed did not affect the outcome of the race. Jeff, the final margin was 2 heads, a head and a nose, I should say. I mean, it's insane that your justification, but they're going to bring Tyler Gaffalione in on the 9th to review films. I guarantee you he's going to get some kind of suspension for this, for putting his hand on the other horse.
Well, maybe. I mean,
what does the public get out of it?
The winner. Okay, yeah, you're right. It didn't affect the finish of the winner, not the second and third place. I mean, how can you be that incompetent? But again,
security didn't impact the effect of the winner either. I mean, if you thought, what was it, Toddy, whatever the horse was that was 17th with John Gordon playing foul. I mean, long range Toddy. If you thought that impacted his finish in the race, I mean, come on.
I know it's beyond belief.
Double standard.
I want to ask you though. In retrospect, I'm very effusive in my praise for Mystic Dan. I thought he ran a great race, even though he got through and all that. Mm-hmm. But could you make a case that he was nothing better than the third best horse in the race? Because Sierra Leone cost himself the race by lugging in, which he's done before. And if he ever learns how to run straight, which maybe he never will, he would have won. Right. And certainly Forever Young. I mean, he got beat 2 noses and he got bounced around like a ping pong ball from the 8th pole of the wire. And instead of just, falling back or he took the hit and was relentless. I mean, how much quality and how much class this horse has to stay right to his task despite being bumped sideways. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
You could always make that argument that somebody in defeat was better than the winner, but at some point you have to say the winner won, right? And so I give all the plaudits to the winner in this particular case. I feel bad for the runners up and the third place finishers who ran well and had some, issues as well. But look, this was not an easy move to get through on the inside. We're going to take a look at it in just a minute, a little bit closer. But to get inside Track Phantom and Joel Rosario there at the quarter pole was a big time move. And it takes a big time horse to get through that hole. And Brian Hernandez with the guts to go through there. You've got to have the animal who's going to get you up through there, because the horse behind him, Catching Freedom, didn't do the same thing behind him. So if he's on Catching Freedom, he doesn't get through that hole, but he was on the right horse. So that's a credit to having that push button ability. And so it's a credit to Mystic Dan in this particular case, because even with that same trip, not every horse wins the race. Catching Freedom does not win with that same trip. He kind of proved it in running right in behind him the whole way. Let's go back to the start here. We talked about bad neighborhoods in our handicapping, right? And we said the two Japanese horses starting right next to each other, the 10 and the 11, that could be kind of a bad place to be. I was like, look, for 8 through 12, we could have ourselves a little bit of problem. Let's go back and look at the start of the Kentucky Derby. It's actually 5 through 11 that becomes the bad neighborhood. Catalytic, the 5's going to break outwards. The Japanese horses don't break. And Jeff, as we talk about this, and we've got them in the box here, all kinds of traffic and issues. And the Japanese horses are back in the back now, and the red and the yellow cap back there. And then we get to the far turn. Here comes Sierra Leone up on a bunch of horses. He's got a wall in front of him. Forever Young's just to his outside, and he gets the first run. Sierra Leone's got to wait to that point. And now we get to the hook in the corner here, and this is where Mystic Dan has the winning move in the race. Not every horse gets through right there, and as they straighten out for home, he then slingshots to the front, and we put our shadow to the outside here, where these two horses are just going to arm wrestle down the stretch with Forever Young and Sierra Leone all over each other again. There was a lot of different pressure points in this race, Jeff, and man, it came down to 3 bobs.
Well, first of all, it's a good thing for the winner that this race was 2024 and 1924, because that kid's over the fence 100 years ago. No jocks letting it through. Second of all, I mean, Forever Young had Sierra Leone leaning on him. Can you imagine if there had been nobody outside of him and the jock could have ridden him straight? There's no doubt in my mind that that bumping cost him that more than this much. So he ran a great race. And of course, you can say Sierra Leone, if he had run straight, he would have won, but at least his undoing was his own fault. Whereas poor Forever Young had no choice, and there's nothing he can do. But Mystic Dan, like I say, he got through, but give him credit for being able to quicken where everybody else looked like they were backing up. He was eager to get going. And let's not forget, you made mention about maybe the mile and a quarter was getting to him. Well, he's by Golden Sense, who was a terrific miler who gets milers, and I'm not really sure Mystic Dan was all that thrilled with that last furlong, but he stayed it. And I give him credit for that. I was impressed.
My dog Graham is taking part in the commentary here. He agrees with just about everything you said. Graham, settle down, my friend.
Graham would have had the exact, if, or maybe he would have had, he would have had the exact if Forever Young gets up. And he should have.
Yeah. Yesterday was dog days at Citizens Bank Park with the Phillies. There were dogs in the crowd. He was watching the game with me and barking at the dogs on TV. So maybe he thinks there's dogs in our Derby recap here. But look, one other point here about Sierra Leone. Let's get back to him for just a moment. We talked about, if he ever puts it together and runs straight. I'm to the point now that I don't think he ever will. And it's not mental. To me, it's physical with him. He paddles with that front left. We know he's inefficient on that side. Just think of your own self and think of the logic of lead changes and things like that. He's obviously stronger on his right side because he's more efficient on that side. He's hitting the ground the right way on the right side. He's not hitting the ground with the same efficiency and strength on the left side, on that front left when he lands. And every race he runs, he does the same thing leaning in. And you say, he was bumped by the other horse and he was responding back to it. Well, what was the deal in the Remsen Stakes? Let's go back to this one. This is a good split photo. On the right is the Kentucky Derby. On the left is the Remsen Stakes. Different jockey even. Jose Ortiz in the black silks here on Sierra Leone's got the left ham hock out there trying to push off door knock and keep the horse off of him because you see he is leaning completely in. The same thing going on the right-hand side where you've got Gaff Leone trying to extend the left hand. The frames aren't exactly exactly matched up in this particular case. They're going to get closer actually in the Derby than just the still photo shows you. And he has to do the same thing. Different riders, different scenario, different distances, one with blinkers, one without blinkers. Chad's tried different things with him, right? Blinkers were on in the Derby, and he did the same thing again. I think at some point you have to say it's physical with this horse, and this is why he kind of comes inward when he runs through the stretch in his races, whether he gets tired in the lead on the, his outside is just too much stronger than the inside late in races. Whatever the case is physically, whatever the physics are behind it, he is coming in, I think, regardless of the situation. And he just better hope that there's nobody inside of him. And he even did it like in the Risen Star when he won. He got past the field and then started coming in. There just happened to not be anybody there. I think if he gets set with the same situation, he'll do the exact same thing again.
Chad Brown has been aware of this, and he's had 6 months to correct it. Obviously, he has tried, I would imagine, in the morning. Nothing works. Nothing works by now. It's not just going to work. Right. And I don't know what the issue is with Mystic Dan is other than you just have to keep him wide, or as wide maybe as you can have him. I mean, because if he's going to be leaning on horses, eventually they're going to find stewards who are going to take him down.
I agree. That's what's going to be tough with him, because he's not a kind of horse who's putting other horses away, right? He doesn't win his races by 5 lengths in open daylight. So he's going to be back in this situation probably again. One last thing about Derby, or two things quickly. You talked about T.O. Passport. He probably had the worst trip of anybody in this year's Kentucky Derby from the start. He had to yank up in a couple different situations during the running of the race. Jockey dropped the stick over the last eighth of a mile or so. T.O. Passport still ran a very credible race in the Kentucky Derby. As we look at the rundown top to bottom, T.O. Passport fifth, beaten 6.5 lengths in this particular spot, with Forever Young, the other horse from Japan, running a good third. Japanese horses, 2 out of the top 3, Jeff. You have to be excited about them coming back here for the Breeders' Cup at Del Mar.
And to see how inexperienced and without a foundation T.O. Passport had coming into this race, and for him to run that well, when he comes back, and I assume he will at Del Mar for the Breeders' Cup, along with and hopefully he, Forever Young, and both these colts will be in good form when they come back. I mean, they are going to be salty. I mean, in the Classic for sure, at 1.25 miles. There are a lot of good things here. You mentioned resilience earlier on, when how well he ran for as far as he was able to run. Phil D'Amato saying Stronghold's going to back up to a middle distance now. He kind of ran a similar race, not as good as Resilience, but he too was right where I wanted him to be, and then couldn't follow through. And then the rest of these horses, I mean, even Endlessly wasn't terrible. And the funny thing about Endlessly is you can say, well, they made a mistake by not running him to the American turf. Didn't matter, because they won that race with a different horse. So it didn't really make any difference there. But he'll go back to grass now. Dornoch, the horse we thought would show speed, never did, and never really was a factor. Track Phantom ran as far as he could possibly run. And then that was the end of that. We talked about Fierceness and how disappointing he is. Just a touch, I thought, would be distance challenged, and he was. So there was a lot of things that we kind of expected was going to happen. Not everything, but it was I thought, a pretty formful race with horses running well that maybe we didn't think were going to run quite as well, but we thought, legitimately belonged, and again, anxious to see what happens next.
And as for Fierceness, I don't have a gauge on him, but my gut tells me it's got to be something physical. This was not the trip. And we talked about this. We said, if he doesn't win this race, if he doesn't run well, it's not going to be the trip that gets him beat. It's going to be the fact that he just didn't show up. And he just didn't show up in this race. He's third, 6 furlongs, 111 and change, which is modest by Kentucky Derby standards. There are many derbies much faster than this. He was in the 3-path turning for home. He had no dirt in his face. There's no excuse for him to drop anchor like that. But I'll tell you, Jeff, I got nervous. The first thing I did at 10:30 in the morning, I think the first race on Derby Day was 10:30. They did a paddock interview when the Churchill simulcast signal came on just after 10 a.m. And Caitlin Free was up on the jockey's porch, and she interviewed John Velazquez. And I thought he had just left a funeral. He was riding the Kentucky Derby winner that day. And every question she said to him, he was just downplaying everything. And he's like, yeah, there might be more speed in here than we thought. And we don't want to go that fast. And just, it was one excuse after it left a bad pit in my stomach at 10 a.m. for the way the rest of the day might go for that horse. And then I got to the point of gambling on the race, and I was like, do I peel back? Do I peel back? And I'm like, nah, go with what you've seen. You've studied too much to get swayed by, a jockey interview. But I'm telling you, he threw water on the favorite, it felt like, at 10 o'clock in the morning. And I didn't have a good feeling about that at that point. And then when Mind Frame, a horse we're going to take a look at a little bit later, wins, Rapoli's going around saying maybe that was the best 3-year-old in America. And I'm thinking, you got the favorite for the Kentucky Derby. What are you talking about? Yeah. I don't know if that camp thought they were going to run that well. By the time it got to 6 o'clock on 6:55 on Saturday, I'm not so sure. I'm not 100% sure they knew they were bringing their horse at their best into the race. I mean, I know he worked great a week ago. Right? That half mile that he galloped out, he basically worked 7/8 and dropped jaws. He worked great, but from that work until race time, I don't know if he was the same horse. He certainly didn't run like it. And you could talk about how, if he takes pressure, he wilts. Watch the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. He didn't lead the Breeders' Cup Juvenile until they turned into the stretch. He sat between horses in that race. Everybody talks about how, he's got to have the lead all to himself. You and I discussed this in the handicapping. We've seen him do that. He got the trip he got in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, basically, in the Derby. And he's not the same horse for whatever reason on particular days that he is on others.
Yeah, something's amiss there. Yeah. That colt that won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile only virtually won a tag team race and still drew off and pulverized everybody was not the same horse that ran last Saturday. And if he had been tagged late or maybe tired in the final furlong, okay, but he literally stopped, and there was no excuse for stopping. He was outside, breezing along. Pace was fast, but not that fast, and nobody was outside him. He moved when he wanted to move, and he was off the bridle in an instant. So I hope they can figure it out, because right now, Endlessly looks to me like he is carrying a burden of the negative more than the positive that he has in his race record, and that's gonna haunt him down the road.
Well, let's turn the page on Derby 150 to the 149th running of the Preakness Stakes. That's next in Baltimore in just under 2 weeks' time. Now, who will show up in Baltimore? Well, we'll find out in the entry box at least on Monday. So we're 6 days away from entries for the Preakness Stakes. Here are the probables right now, or the possibles, we really should call them. Mystic Dan, the Kentucky Derby winner, he had a better day, third day after the Derby than immediately after. And Kenny McPeak, instead of sending him to Saratoga right away, as the plan might have been, decided he's going to keep him at Churchill. He's going to train down there, and he's going to make a decision on entry day on what to do for the Preakness Stakes. That feels a little better than it did, say, 24, 48 hours ago. Just deal for D. Wayne Lucas, 17th in the Derby. He'll try to pull an oxbow and rebound and win the Preakness Stakes for Lucas. Muth and Imagination, the two horses from Bob Baffert from the West Coast, they will vie for amongst favoritism, certainly the favorites if Mystic Dan is not in the race. Copper Tax, the local winner for Gary Capuano of the Federico Tessio. Lucas has a second bullet possibly to fire in the Pat Day Mile winner, Seize the Gray. Steve Asmussen, who always supports the Preakness, it seems, got Informed Patriot with an automatic berth through his win at Oaklawn Park in the Bathhouse Row. Chad Brown still on the fence, as is Butch Reed with Tuscan Gold and Uncle Heavy, respectively. They could go in the Peter Pan this weekend or go to the Preakness. Well, though by Saturday, obviously, if they go in the Peter Pan, that race will enter Wednesday for Saturday. I'm thinking the Wine Steward for Mike Maker might make an appearance late in the game. Nobody's talking about him right now, but I think he could be an 11th hour entrant in this race. He just worked this past weekend. He ran a bang-up second to Encino in the Lexington, his only start this year. He would make a lot of sense. And Mugatu, the horse who was on the also eligible list for Jeff Engler, 5th in the Bluegrass, also eligible for the Derby. He was listed today as a possible for the Preakness Stakes by Pimlico officials. So, Jeff, we've got 10 right now. We'll see how the field shakes out over the next 6 days.
I sure hope Mystic Dan runs, but I only hope he runs if he's good. I mean, he's healthy enough to run. I don't want him to run him back, and I don't think Kenny would do this. just because he's got a chance at a Triple Crown. It was a hard race he ran. I mean, he was fully spent, and now you're coming back in 2 weeks. If it's good for the horse, if he's screaming and kicking and playing, and even sometimes that's not a good indication. But if he is, and they want to take a shot at this, I hope it'll help spice up the race and the TV ratings. And by the way, I still can't figure out why the ratings for the Derby was the best since 1989. If you knew there was going to be this exciting of a race, okay, I could see watching it, but who knew?
Yeah.
Right? But anyway, but I'd like to see Mystic Dan in the race because, but on the other hand, you're giving away this. Number one, you're running back in 2 weeks after a hard race. Number two, you're running against a horse that kind of kicked your behind in the Oklahoma, in the Arkansas Derby. So I wouldn't really be. I wouldn't question whether they keep him in the barn, especially the way Muth has been training. You can see him on the inside over the weekend with a very nice horse named Imagination who was nosed out in the Santa Anita Derby. And I thought, Jeremy, that in 111-2, this looks like the easiest 111-2 you're ever going to see. I think Muth looks spectacular here, don't you?
Yeah, he's going the easier of the two, I think, in here. He's coming out of that win against Mystic Dan in the Arkansas Derby where he did it pretty handily that day. Imagination coming off a tougher race. Imagination never wows anybody. He's always kind of in the fight. But you'll notice here at the end of the work, he's got to really be chirped on here to try to keep up in the gallop out. And it was certainly an easier drill for Muth, who is going to be the Preakness favorite, I believe. Maybe even if Mystic Dan shows up in there. Of course, we know Baffert's won the Preakness 8 times. He's going to get bet in Baltimore. That just seems to be the thing. If you look at the Preakness future wager bet, which closed this past weekend for pool number 2, Muth was the 7-2 morning line favorite. This pool closed about an hour before the Kentucky Derby. So Mystic Dan at 45-1, you're feeling very good about that if you're having this horse in terms of Preakness future wager, because he's probably 5-2 or so in the Preakness stakes. Even if Muth is in there, he's probably a clear-cut second choice, maybe vies for favoritism off the Kentucky Derby win. So you got a good price in that particular spot. Tuscan Gold at 17-1, I think will be shorter than that. Imagination would be shorter than that. So you got good value in that Preakness future wager if you did get involved. And certainly, 7-2 on Muth's probably going to look pretty good at post time as well. You still got to get by another 2 weeks. Of course, there was the gamble in that you make the race in playing that horse for the futures. But if Mystic Dan doesn't show up, Muth could be 6-5, 7-5 in the Preakness stakes, and 7-2 would look like pretty decent value in that respect, Jeff.
Yeah, especially considering that there's no way you can dismiss his last win because the Derby winner came out of that race.
Right.
So it was a legitimate race. Then you've got the Baffert factor. Then you got the fresh horse factor. And then you have the workout. So, I mean, and plus he's a tactical horse where he doesn't need help. He can make his own trip. So, and he's a good horse. They paid a lot of money for him. I'll never forget my first experience with Muth. It was early last summer, and I had heard about him. No, it was actually in the spring, I think. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So I went over to Baffert's barn to talk to him about something, and I said, "This coach you spent all that money for. I mean, how's he doing? Where is he? Can I see him?" He says, "Turn around." I turned around, and this horse was like 3 feet away from me, within kicking range. He could have kicked me. I said, "That's him?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "You should have told me. I could have backed up and backed right into him. Then I would have been in big trouble." So I've always followed him. I've always liked him. I did think there was a time where I thought maybe he had distance limitations. But now that he's an older, more mature 3-year-old, I don't think a mile and 3/16 is going to bother him. He just won going a mile and 8 and did it easily.
And we talk about Mystic Dan, the mile and 3/16 might be best for him actually in the Triple Crown Series. He got the Derby to a mile and a quarter. Does he get another mile and a quarter at Belmont, in the Belmont run this year at Saratoga? He's probably better a little bit shorter. That wire got to him in time, I think, in the Derby. So if you're the Mystic Dan camp and you want to win another Triple Crown race, you have that judgment of, is a 16th of a mile shorter better, or is waiting the extra 3 weeks to the Belmont Stakes better? That's the kind of decision that they have to make with Kenny McPeak and his ownership group from Arkansas. So that's a look as we look ahead to the Preakness Stakes. Let's go to our third topic of 5 this week on It's Official. we want to find somebody else in this 3-year-old crop. If it's not the horses from the Preakness, it's not the horses from the Derby, who might be waiting in the wings? And we already mentioned his name once. He won on the undercard on Saturday in a race 3 allowance for the Rapoli Silks and Todd Pletcher. It was a horse named Mindframe, now 2 for 2.
By the quarter pole in control. Higgins' boat is set down for the drive, but Mindframe is too, and Mindframe with an instant response kicks away by 4 and now by 5 past the final furlong marker. Mindframe, high gear for the final furlong. Cornishman's trying to run up into second inside of Higgins' boat, but it is all Mindframe in a masterful front-running ride from Murad Ortiz Jr. Cornishman did get second. Higgins' boat was third. Anthem King fourth.
It's not the Rapoli Silks there. Those were the Viola Silks, Vinny Viola and Company of St. Elias Stable, the co-owners with Rapoli on Mindframe. Jeff, they're already talking potentially Belmont Stakes with this horse off these 2 victories.
Why not? I mean, 2 for 2. He came his last 5/16 in this race in 30 flat. That's a bunch of sixes put together. And he did it literally geared down. There was no gallop out there because he was already geared down to a walk at the wire. He could have gone much faster, I'm sure. But tactical speed, proven around distance by a constitution, certainly bred to run 1.25 miles. Fresh, improving, incredibly gifted. That's a serious racehorse. And it couldn't have come soon enough, I think, for Rapoli after his disappointment with his Derby favorite. This colt can pick up the chase now and maybe represent the stable. And maybe he's actually, who knows, better. He could be.
We'll find out. But if you're running this horse in the Belmont and you're done with Fierceness for the Belmont Stakes, then there's something more amiss than just a horse who, got misfired and didn't like the pace scenario. So this will be a good tell, right? If this horse Mindframe is in the Belmont Stakes and Fierceness isn't, when are we going to see Fierceness again? The Travers off like a 4-month layoff and try to come out?
Maybe, I don't know. I mean, they're going to run the horse they think is going to win. And maybe this is their real star that they didn't even know was the star until now. Yeah. Maybe Fierceness has got to play second fiddle now to this colt. And based on what I've seen, I mean, this colt's got so much more to prove, but I mean, what a way to start off a career. 2 for 2, fast on figs, and never asked in either one.
He could be the horse waiting in the wings for this 3-year-old crop. He could be the Archangelo maybe of 2024, like last year, made his debut in the Triple Crown Series and upended the horses who were veterans of the Derby and Preakness. Now, think maybe not even Archangelo, but maybe Arrogate. Let's talk about a horse who really hasn't done anything to this point in terms of the Triple Crown discussion, and maybe for later in the year. Arrogate, of course, made his big launch into stardom in the Travers Stakes later in the year. What about a horse Knightsbridge? We talked about him earlier this year. We thought he might show up in the Pat Day Mile, but he wasn't entered in the Pat Day Mile for Bill Mott. Let's give the fans a chance to see Knightsbridge in his only start this year. He won his debut at Churchill by about 10 in the fall, and he came back at Gulfstream and ran a banger first time back.
And they're at the top of the stretch. Junior Alvarado and the son of Nyquist, Knightsbridge, now get a clear lead. They're 3 on top. C-Streak has done everything he can, but what he cannot do is stay with Knightsbridge. Knightsbridge delivers a big-time run in his seasonal debut. He'll be geared down and 6 lengths in front. Knightsbridge, sharp.
Now, we're not talking Belmont Stakes with Knightsbridge likely, so there are some other options. But, Jeff, he didn't make it back on the work tab on Derby weekend. And, again, we thought we might see this horse. The original thought was he was going to be pointed towards the Pat Day Mile.
Either that or maybe the Peter Pan, but now I'm not sure what is going on with him because he had a healthy work pattern after this race. In fact, he worked on the 27th at Churchill, which was normal, but the following weekend, which was Derby weekend, he didn't work. And I said, well, okay, maybe he's an off track, whatever. Maybe they missed some time with him. I don't know. But now we're all the way around to Tuesday, and there's still no works for him. So now he's gone, 10, 11 days without work. Right. That's not a good sign. I mean, you can't keep starting and stopping on these horses, pretending there's nothing wrong. I don't know what his issues are, but Lamont and Godolphin have themselves a running son of a gun here with this colt who is by Nyquist and out of a mare by Bernardini. I mean, he is supposed to be among the very best in his in his crop. He's on his first 2 races. I hope he's okay. I hope he's fine, because we need him in the division. He'd be a great horse to have in some of these midsummer and late early fall races for 3-year-olds.
If you're going to get restarted, they've got the Matt Win for $400,000 at Churchill on June 9th, day after the Belmont Stakes. You could you could keep him around 1 turn and try the Woody Stevens, but that's a tough race coming, first time in stakes company against top-notch sprinters on Belmont Day. Of course, all the big goals are in July, the Haskell July 20th, 27th for the Jim Dandy. Those are the races that your late season horses are going to start to get, into the discussion for. Maybe we'll see a horse like Knightsbridge in that. So 2 of them waiting in the wings, we think could be Mindframe and Knightsbridge as we turn the corner here past the first leg of this year's Triple Crown. Now, on Friday, it was a super performance by the winner of the Kentucky Oaks. Her name was Torpedo Anna. Jeff, a big Tom Petty fan, of course. Damn the Torpedoes, Tom Petty's 1976 album. Not to be petty, they damned the Torpedoes in the Kentucky Oaks. And Jeff, a couple hit songs off that album were Don't Do Me Like That and Here Comes My Girl.
Right.
Here she came in the Kentucky Oaks. She was awfully, awfully good.
Torpedo Anna is still there, and Ways and Means is right alongside, and Just FYI is making her run, and the 3 of them will come to the top of the stretch. 3/4, 111.75, and they're into the stretch, and Torpedo Anna tries to take him all the way. Just FYI has moved up on the outside. Ways and Means has started to get way. Regulatory Risk has run a big one, and is down the center of the track. Torpedo Anna still going strong at the 16th pole. Oh, she's got plenty left. And Brian Hernandez and Torpedo Anna dominate the 150th Kentucky Oaks.
So it's Torpedo Anna, same connections as the Kentucky Derby. First time since the 50s when Ben Jones won it as a trainer, the Oaks Derby double. Kenny McPeak pulls it off. And first time since Calvin Burrell officially in 2009 pulled it off for a jockey and Brian Hernandez. They look kind of similar in the stretch to the inside and with a clear lead about the 8th pole, but they did it in different styles, of course. Mystic Dan coming from further off the pace, and Torpedo Anna just went and took the race right to him from the start, Jeff.
Just a $40,000 yearling. Somebody's got a pretty good eye in that barn. But Torpedo Anna, I mean, if you looked at her form, her only defeat was in the Goldenrod when she was second to Intricate, who was really good at that time. Her comeback win in the Fantasy was spectacular. She handled the off track, which was the first time that she had to try it beautifully. And here's another thing that I loved about the race is that she'd run 4 times, and in none of her races did she really show a lot of tactical speed. She laid off the pace and made a run. This time she said, forget that. I'm just going to go to the front and run everybody to the ground, which is exactly what she did. And if you looked at the video of that race down the backstretch, she was just galloping. I mean, she said, well, this is nice. Nobody's going to be kicking dirt in my face. I'm just going to be galloping along. And you and I both liked the Just FYI in this race because we thought she needed her last race. She was coming back to the race. She trained really well since. Just FYI ran her behind off.
She ran her race, yes.
Every chance she fired her best shot. She ran as good as I thought it would be needed to win a race like that. And Torpedo Anna just said, get away.
Yeah.
So 2 good fillies. They'll meet again probably, I'm sure, somewhere down the road. But right now, the versatility that Torpedo Anna has makes her look pretty darn formidable in any race she runs. And by the way, her number was very, very strong in this race. It wasn't like she got lucky and won the race. I mean, she actually got a better number than the champion who Matic got the same day. So, I mean, it's not like she's slow. She's fast. She's good. She's versatile. And she's on top of the division easily at this stage.
Yeah, boy. I mean, she took the best shot that Just FYI had. She gave her best shot and sloughed it off. A really fantastic performance. We'll probably see these fillies all again at Saratoga when you look at the connections involved there with McPeak, Mott, Chad Brown running 3-4 in this spot. This looks like Saratoga kind of showdown for the Alabama races like that this summer where we'll get to see these 3-year-old fillies again. Maybe Cotillion at Parks Labor Day weekend or into September, a shot there to see them match up again on the East Coast. So Should be a fabulous run through these 3-year-old filly races here. There was some quick talk about Torpedo Anna potentially running back in the Preakness. That lasted 24 hours until McPeak had another horse potentially for the Preakness named Mystic Dan. So necessity is the mother of invention when it comes to which race am I running in. And we've talked about that many times. A lot of times, like Mind Frame and Fierceness, right? Which one's going to go in the Belmont? Well, let's see which one's eligible to play today and which one is ready to run. And that's kind of a lot of times how these determinations are made. So great effort. Damn the torpedoes. It was Torpedo Anna. She's named for a relative of one of the owners. Her name was Anna Thorpe, who's a swimmer, of course. Ian Thorpe, the Australian swimmer, the Torpedo, known for that. This is the second time now in my memory that a Kentucky Oaks winner was named for a young lady who was pretty good at sports, Torpedo Anna. Then Catherine Sophia, she was named for the niece of Chuck Zachney, who owned Catherine Sophia, who was a soccer player, I believe, at Rider University or Widener, one of those East Coast soccer schools. So yeah, the little history there. So moral of the story is that you want to win the Kentucky Oaks, name the filly after a good athlete, young lady somewhere in your family.
You're too young to remember Chris Everett.
Back
in the early 70s, but she was pretty good too in her division. And
yes,
she just to digress just a bit, she came out and ran in a match race out here at Hollywood Park. Against a filly named Miss Musket, who was all the rage out here. And I think the margin of victory was Chris Everett by 50, literally, in that race. But Chris Everett was out there for that race, as was Jimmy Connors, who was the boyfriend at the time.
That was almost the margin of defeat for Fierceness. I'm still not over it in the Kentucky Derby. Let's go to our fifth topic on the board. And as we do most weeks here on It's Official, we're looking for stars of tomorrow. We tweaked this a little bit about a month or so ago when Overcharged, the star filly on the turf sprint scene in Louisiana, we said she is a star of tomorrow because she's going to show up on a big stage somewhere soon, and we're going to all know who she is. She got that bid on Oaks Day and ran another cracker on national TV. It was great to see that for Overcharged. Well, here's another veteran who's due for a spot on the big stage. His name is Next, and on the Thursday card at Churchill Downs, he won the Isaac Murphy.
Quarter mile to go. Next to catch the lead is 5 off the turn. Next comes wide off the turn, but is in control. 3/16 remaining. Di Vernon comes through between horses. Masked Parade down the center. Classic Causeway gives way. Red Run is there, but up top it is all Next, who's cleared by a dozen lengths with a 16th to go. Geared down on the return trip for Next.
All right, Jeff, let's give him his stage, right? I mean, he's got to get a chance in one of these big races somewhere down the line. Trainer Cowens has got him just punching out these marathon races, but let's see him against the big boys sometime.
I'd like to see it. Now, maybe if I were the owner, and I know this is a gelding, and my goal is to have him be doing this for the next 5 years, I wouldn't get too creative. But this is a horse who won this race by 11 1/4 lengths. He'd won his previous race by 25 lengths. He's taken his last 3 starts by a combined 48 lengths.
Whew.
I mean, he is, and he's a good horse. He's won 10 out of 20, but again, not since he's joined this barn has he really gotten this good. He's won 6 out of his last 7. Mm-hmm. And if you think, well, being a marathoner is one thing, but to drop back and run a middle distance against the best horses in the older handicap division is another. Well, it is.
Yeah.
But Next, you may remember as a 3-year-old, he won a stakes race at Churchill against 3-year-olds, running a mile in 1:35 flat. So it's not like he's slow. It's not like he hasn't done a middle distance before. And the way he's been winning and doing it with so much ease, man, I'd like to see him drop. I would like to see, as a fan, not as an owner, but as a fan, to drop back and maybe run in a race like the Whitney or one of those kind of races. And he's a gray horse. He's a flashy horse. He's got a great record. I mean, he'd be a really popular horse.
He'd be popular, yeah.
If anybody knew he existed.
Yeah. That's what we're looking for here. So in our star of tomorrow, we're trying to get him out on the stage. You had to be watching on Thursday to catch him at Churchill Downs. Maybe we can get him on one of these main act races coming up on a Saturday here over the course of the summer. But next is a very, very cool horse. And all kidding aside, right, it's if you've got an ATM machine who can just keep racking up victories, stay healthy, he's not hard on himself in these races, more power to the owners too. But as a fan, it'd be fun to see him take on some of these other big challenges. But I certainly wouldn't pressure somebody with a horse like that to do anything more than what they want to do with him and what's best for him, obviously. But be pretty cool to see him in one of these races over the course of the summer. Even at Churchill Downs, if they want to bring him back for the Stephen Foster, it'd be kind of cool to see him there over a track we obviously know that he likes after winning that big race in the Isaac Murphy. So that's going to wrap up our It's Official review of Kentucky Derby 150 and the pomp and circumstance around it. Dan's Derby, we talked about all the different aspects of Mystic Dan's victory in Kentucky Derby 150. Hats off to Brian Hernandez, Kenny McPeak, and all the connections of this year's Derby winner. On to the Preakness next, where maybe 9-10 horses right now are kind of on the cusp of making up the field. We'll see how that shakes out by the time entries come around. We got a chance to see Muth's work out in company with fellow Preakness entry mate Imagination. Of course, there'll be separate betting interest in there, but both expected to enter the Preakness for Baffert. Waiting in the wings, who might be the 3-year-olds who play the role of Archangelo this year, or maybe Arrogate from years past? We gave you 2 names to watch there in Mindframe and Knight's Bridge. Not to be petty, we damned the Torpedoes with Torpedo Anna, dominant winner of the Kentucky Oaks. What a performance she put on Friday through the slop. And our star of tomorrow's pretty darn good today, but we hope he gets his chance to shine in the spotlight. That being the Isaac Murphy Stakes winner next at Churchill Downs on Thursday. These 5 topics are now official because Jeff Siegel and I said so. That's the way we play the game. And each week we take 5 more topics and put them on the board. Next week, it'll be a Preakness preview type edition of the It's Official podcast, as we will know the entries for Preakness 149 by the time we reconvene next Tuesday, Jeff. They'll draw the Preakness Stakes on Monday night in a ceremony. The full card for Black Eyed Susan Day will be drawn on Sunday, and then the full Preakness Day card will be drawn on Monday next week. So we'll know all the players for the middle jewel when we come back here next week.
Yeah, and let's not forget on next Tuesday we'll have our never way too early weather report, which was actually sort of accurate this year.
You're pretty accurate with that, yeah.
Well, we had 40% chance of rain with good, otherwise good weather, so they got one right, the weathermen. I wouldn't expect them to make it 2 in a row. But looking forward to a great day of racing on, and of course the Black Eyed Susan as well on Friday. But Saturday, week from Saturday, a great series of stakes races are always offering good gambling opportunities. The Preakness certainly will be fun as always, and then on to Saratoga for the Belmont. So looking forward to another great month of racing here on all fronts.
Thanks to everybody who tuned in Kentucky Derby Week. We had our best numbers ever on the podcast that we do, Jeff and I, and across the first channels. So thanks so much for all the viewership. Be sure to like and share this out on your channels with others and help us continue to grow the audience. Jeff and I will be back on Friday with our First Call Handicapping podcast, where on Friday we'll look at 8 stakes races over the course of this weekend. Peter Pan, a potential Belmont Stakes prep coming up Saturday from Aqueduct. So we will talk about the Peter Pan and also the 2 big races with Royal Ascot implications, the Royal Palm Juvenile and Royal Palm Juvenile fillies this weekend at Gulfstream Park, where last year's winner for George Weaver went over to Royal Ascot and took the big crown there as well. So we'll talk about those 2-year-old races. We'll talk about the Peter Pan and 5 other stakes races, I'm sure, mixed in throughout the course of the country on Friday's podcast, First Call. So on behalf of Jeff Siegel and myself, Jeremy Plonk, and everybody with First, hope you had a great Kentucky Derby. We look forward to talking Preakness with you when we reconvene next Tuesday. Take care, everybody.